Hey guys, welcome back to the Disciplined HQ podcast. I'm here with Trey Morrison. Trey, how are you this morning?
Honored to be here, Corey.
Man, well, I'm so glad you're here. We got connected with Josh Cachadorian from a previous episode, and obviously, if you come recommended from Josh, there's an insane story attached to it. And we talked before this, and I did a deep dive on your Instagram, and there is just so much to get to. And you said you wanted to start with faith over fitness, so let's hear your faith story, Trey.
Yeah, Corey. So I want to take this back even a little farther than I did with Josh on his podcast. But I remember the very first thing I said about God was, I hate God. It was the very first thing I said. I was a young kid. I was in fourth grade, and my best friend was actually killed in an insane, tragic car accident. Like the most insane thing you could ever imagine. And I remember I had just left him at this thing called Story Spinners, and I'd just seen him. I got home, and we got the news that he had been killed in a car crash. And I just remember all these adults around me saying, like, God has a plan. And as a young kid, that was just like, could not wrap his head around, like, number one, I thought they were lying about the event. I was like, there's no way, I just saw him. This isn't real. And then everybody tell me that God has a plan. I remember like yelling, I hate God. Like if this is God's plan, I hate God and this is stupid. I was a little kid. And I think that's something for everybody to keep in mind. That's probably not the best thing to tell a young child, when they're trying to figure things out. But I share that with you because that was my first initial thought process of God. And after that event, started going to church with my family, got saved, baptized, did the things, that you're supposed to do. I didn't really know what any of it meant, but that was what we were supposed to do. And throughout that time, Corey, like, I didn't know what a relationship with Christ was. I didn't know what a relationship with God was. It was just like, oh yeah, like we're just supposed to do this thing. You go to church on Sunday and that's just how it is. And throughout that time, as I got a little bit older, I had quite a few negative experiences in church, man. Like, there was this event one time we were playing with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I don't know if anybody remembers what those were, but we were like laying in the
100%.
yeah, awesome. So we were laying in the church like playing with Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I remember like the pastor saying like that's like a demonic game, and I'm like, once again, I was probably like 10 or 11, and I'm just like, what? Like, I didn't say anything, but in my head I was like intelligent enough to be like, this is getting really silly. Like, from my like first experience with God and then this thing, I'm like, dude, I'm just a kid trying to have fun with my brothers. Like, I'm not thinking about demons right now, um,
Yeah.
so that planted like another negative seed in my head. And then I looked around in my church. As a young kid, I was very athletic. I had dreams and aspirations to play professional sports like a lot of young kids. And that's who I looked up to, Corey. I looked up to these super athletes. I thought they were superhumans. And I looked around in my church and there was nobody like that. There was no man in my church that I looked at and was like, man, I want to be like that guy. Like, there was nobody that was physically fit. There was nobody that was like big and strong or like disciplined or anything like that. And that led like my brother and myself to think that like Christians were just weak. Like, I just thought that like Christians were weak. With my negative experiences in church already, Corey, I started really formulating this atheism belief with my brother. And it's like, I just think Christians are scared. I mean, so from the time I was, I don't know, 11 to 12 to, 18 to 20, like that was my thought process on God. I was like, God's not real. Christians are just scared. They're afraid of things. They're all weak. They're all soft. And I'm just being raw and vulnerable. That was my thought process. And my thought
Yeah.
process was that, Corey, because I was looking at men and not looking at Christ. I didn't see the difference. I was looking at models for Christians through men instead of being like, who is Jesus? Like, what did Jesus represent?
Hmm.
And throughout those years, I was heavily into sports, Corey. I identified as a baseball player, and that was like the core of me. And my brother and myself, we got involved at a young age with drugs and alcohol and partying. Somehow we got connected with some very powerful drug dealers, that my older brother hung around. And I remember a bunch of experiences, Corey, that, these dealers would be at the house, like having parties at my house, and they would try to get me to partake in these things with them as like a 13, 14-year-old kid. And I would always tell them, I'm an athlete, I don't do that. So I was the only one there that wasn't doing drugs or drinking or anything like that. And I would always say, I'm an athlete, I don't do that. And I remember, I'll never forget this, man. The dealer said, I sell drugs to all the athletes. And in the back of my head, I'm like, no way, dude, there's no way. So I'm thinking about all these local guys that I look up to, right? All these local athletes that I look up to. I'm like, there's no way, man. He's just lying. But I'm not going to lie. In that moment, I was like, dang, that planted a negative seed in my head, And as I was around that crowd long enough, you started smoking weed and like started layering into that stuff. And I then got injured in football and I couldn't play baseball anymore. And I'll never forget, man, I was warming up for baseball tryouts my junior year, and my coach pulled me to the side. He said, I need a release note from your doctor about your back injury in football. So I called the doctor right there on the spot. Doctor said I couldn't play sports. And I just remember hanging up, dude. I took it at face value. I didn't fight. I didn't try. It was almost like I was looking for a way out as I reflect back on that time of my life. And I remember going and taking this out on the coach, saying some very negative, hateful things to him. And I sped off in my car, spinning tires, and just bawling like a baby, dude. Like crying my eyes out, screaming, cussing, driving home, and feeling like the first love of my life was ripped out of my hands. Because sports, Corey, for me, was the only place that I ever felt comfortable in my life. Like I was a self-conscious kid, like I struggled with self-confidence, and a lot of people may not have seen that, but like that's how I felt on the inside. If you put me on a baseball field, if you put me on a basketball court, if you put me on a football field, it was like everything in the world disappeared. It was just like, man, this is like this flow state, this feeling of just pure freedom. And when that was ripped away, my identity was ripped away. Because here I was, a young kid that identified as a baseball player, and that was all gone. So as all that was gone, Corey, the guys were still around. The drugs were still around. So here I am, a 17-year-old kid, and I find myself looking for that freedom that I got from sports through drugs. And it started out when I was just a little bit of drugs, and then like anything, man, you do more, you need more, you start mixing, whether it's cocaine, ecstasy, Molly, MDMA, opiates, alcohol, whatever it was that we could mix and get a high. And
yeah,
Corey, I bonded with my brother through this. Like me and my brother, we did drugs together. That was like something we really enjoyed doing together. And throughout this period, it was like we just kept getting deeper and deeper into this world. And when I turned 18 and got a job, well, then I had money, right? So I could start spending more money on drugs at that point, And I share all this with you because this is really important to the story, because keep in mind that, I'm atheist throughout this whole point in my life. And the deeper I get into the drug world, the more these atheistic beliefs become stronger, right? The more they become stronger, the more I'm just like, yeah, Christians are definitely weak, as I'm having to use drugs to get through my day, telling other people that they're weak. Throughout that time, Corey, I got a job. My dad got me a job at a CNC machine shop, and I worked my way up through that career. It's because I sit here and say, like, man, I was doing all these drugs, but I was a very progressive person. It wasn't like I was on the side of the road homeless or anything like that. Like I held a good career. Not only did I hold a good career, I worked my way up through this career, up to a management role position. And this ate me alive because everybody from the outside looked at Trey as like, man, he's doing good. Like he dropped out of school. Like he didn't even make it through high school. He's now got a job. He's now working up in this career. So people saw that version of Trey, but behind closed doors, Trey was snorting cocaine, right, to get through his work day. Trey was popping a bunch of Adderall. Trey was, doing pills with his quote unquote friends just to have a good time at night and staying up late, staying up for days. But I was always at work the next day, Corey. I was always there. I was always showing up, and I was always trying to progress in that point. So I battled this like inner turmoil of like people saw this version of Trey, and then I saw the version of me in the mirror. And I know somebody's going to hear this, and I know that they're gonna feel this. The absolute worst pain you can go through in this entire life is walking through life with a mask. Is people viewing you as one thing, and behind closed doors, you're a completely different person, and you know it. And if that speaks to anybody's hearts, man, I just want to encourage you. You're setting yourself up for long-term failure, and you have to face that pain. Now, as my brother and I, we continue, Corey, to do these drugs together. We continue to do these things, and then I found fitness, right? So some guys at work, they set up a weight loss competition. I'd kind of let myself go, and I was just drinking, doing drugs, working, doing the kind of the normal thing. Bunch of guys at work set up a weight loss competition, and that was a spark in me, man. I was like one of the only ones that stuck through it. I ended up, losing like 58 pounds. I was just starving myself and running all the time. And I started to find that freedom again, man. I started to find that freedom again. I started to find that feeling of like, oh, like I can be an athlete. Like I can find this same feeling that I was chasing through sports as a young kid or through drugs as an adult. I could find that same feeling through working out and pushing myself. And whenever I got to that point, Corey, my brother and I started to kind of separate because he kept going down this drug world and I was trying to get out of it, right? I was then starting to like get into personal training as I was working my full-time job, and I was getting more into fitness, and I didn't need all these drugs anymore, And that created a real hatred between the two of us. Because he was going deeper into this world, and it was like this thing that we always did together. And not only did we always do it together, Corey, we would always do it and be like, look at others and say, man, how do people get through life sober? Like, we truly envy people. And it wasn't something where we were proud that we did drugs. We were just like, wow, how do they like do that? Like, I can't imagine waking up every day and being completely sober to get through life. And we truly envied all those people that we saw. And so you could imagine as we started separating, he really started having a lot of hatred towards me. He really, almost like a sellout, right? Like you're just adapting to the culture and the world. And so it was really heartbreaking for me, man. It was really hard to do, and it was very difficult, and it created a lot of tension between the two of us. And so much tension that, one of our last times we saw each other, we got in a fist fight. Firefighters were there. They ended up having to break it up. It was a classic white trailer trash scene that you could ever imagine in your life. And, it was like one of our last occurrences, man. And we said some things to each other that day, Corey, that I couldn't even repeat, like to this day. Like it's so, because we knew how to push each other's buttons, right? Like just things you shouldn't say to each other.
Yeah.
And that was kind of our last meeting, man. So fast forward to, a couple years later, I was working full time. I was a personal trainer on the side, and I slowly built up my business, man. And I finally got to the point where I could quit my full-time job and open up my own gym. So I had my own gym. I had an employee there. We were growing. Things were going good. And I got a phone call that at 4 a.m. that morning, and it was that my brother was murdered. And I'll never forget, man. I'll never forget being in a fetal position in my bathroom, and I felt like somebody came down, man, and just took the soul out of my body, and I was an empty carcass. And that's the best way that I know how to explain it. And I just remember sitting there curled up in a ball. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. Just for hours. The door was locked. The family was there trying to get in, and I just didn't know how to respond. And all I had was flashbacks of the last occurrence we had together, right? Of the things we said to each other. And it's really tough, Corey, because as young kids, we were best friends. Like we were 1 year apart, less than a year apart. So like we didn't always do drugs together. That wasn't the only part of our lives. Like we were young, innocent kids for a long time where we were just best buds, and it just evolved into that. Mm-hmm. So I had flashbacks of that, and then flashbacks of all the negative. And Josh always says something that like God breaks the man before he makes the man. Like that's one of my favorite things when Josh says. And like in this moment, like I couldn't have been more broken. I couldn't have been more empty. And throughout this time, the family comes to the house, Corey. Keep in mind, I'm still atheist at this point. And God has blessed me to put me in a position of leadership. A lot of young kids that I've led, I've gotten to help get athletes to college, a lot of clients, a lot of just gym community in our small town. And I remember, Corey, all these people were coming to the house. I didn't want to see any of them, dude. Like, I was so depressed, man. I didn't bathe for 2 weeks. Like, I was just, I didn't do anything. I didn't want to see anybody. Like, I was completely checked out of life from this emotional and spiritual pain that I was dealing with. And when all these people would come to my house, Corey, I really struggled because I found myself battling that same inner turmoil of like, man, Trey, here's all these people that care about you, and you don't even want to see them. Like, dude, you're a terrible person. Like, what are you doing? And I truly explain depression like this, feeling low is normal. It's a part of life. It's a part of going through life. It's a part of your journey. But true depression, from what I've experienced after traumatic events, it's this push and pull of, I don't want to see anybody. I want all the lights off in the room, but I also want to hug everybody that I know. And I don't want either one of them. You're sitting in the middle of both, and you're scared to go one way and you're scared to go the other. And that is the way that I define the depression that I was in, because that's exactly how I felt. And, luckily, man, my brother, the employee that I was talking about at the gym, Brandon McDowell, he kept the gym running during this time, because if it wasn't for him, I don't know what I would have done, because I was, like I said, I was done with life essentially. And this is where the story takes a massive turn, man. I reached out to a psychiatrist and a therapist during this time, Corey. I was really struggling. That's what my family wanted me to do because they were all concerned about me. And I remember telling them I was concerned about myself. I get you guys are concerned because I'm concerned. And, people can say what they want about traditional psychiatry and therapy, man, but I hopped on a Zoom call, Corey, and this big burly guy, big beard, his name's Aaron. He pops up and, he starts talking to me. And when I answered the questionnaire to get enrolled into this therapy and psychiatry, they asked me my religious beliefs. Very clearly I said I'm atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't read the Bible. I don't go to church. And he pops up, big old smile, dude, bigger guy. And he says, brother, I know your background. I know your beliefs. He said, but I've been Narcan back to life 7 times. He said, I've lived a double lifestyle for 27 years. He was a meth addict and ran his own business. And as soon as he said that double lifestyle thing, I was like, oh, wow, okay. And he kept going. He said, I can't do nothing for you, man, but I know somebody who can. He said, Jesus Christ saved my life. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, here we go with another Jesus talk. I'm like, dear Lord. And but when he said the double life thing, Corey, and what he had been through, his testimony, there was a spark in the back of my head in that moment I'll never forget. I'm like, man, if Jesus did something with you, like, surely he can do something with me. Because I felt like he had done way worse than me. Like, I'm just being real. I'm like, man, dude, 27 years you've done this? Like, all right, like I'm way ahead of that, And right. Aaron shares that with me, Corey, and he says all that, brother, and he's like, I just need you to do 3 things for me, Trey. I said, sure. He said, get a Bible, find a church to go to, and start listening to K-Love Radio. And at this point, Corey, I'm at a point in my life where I'm literally either going to kill myself or I'm going to accept Jesus Christ. Like, that's how depressed I was. It wasn't like there was no like feeling low. It was literally like I went to take my own life. And in that moment, I had an opportunity to either choose Jesus Christ or choose taking my own life. And the day that I went to take my own life, Corey, I had this flashcards flying through my head rapidly, man, of all these faces of people that I've impacted. And the only thing I can attribute this to is God, this spiritual experience. That I'm sitting by this pond that I'm going to drown myself. And it was rapid, like a rapid deck, over and over and over. Just the same people, of all these people that I've impacted, all these people that I lead, all these people that I coach. It's like, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? Is it going to be their fault? And I sat there for 30 minutes, dude, and I left that day. And obviously I did not take my own life that day. And that was the turning point. Like, that is where I had to get, Corey, to really find Jesus. Like, I had to get, like, that was my bottom of my barrel, to the point of, like,
Yeah.
absolute suicide.
If I could ask Trey, why did you choose drowning?
It's a great question, man, because that was my biggest fear, and I was in so much pain. I wanted to make it hurt as much as possible.
Hmm.
So, like,
Well, I'm sorry.
no, it's, I can say this today with a lot of fire and passion behind it, because it was the launching pad that changed my life. It really was. That's why I got this Run with Christ hoodie on now. And, since then, Corey, the gym has transformed into, like, if you walk right into our facility, it says Faith Family Fitness. We have a prayer board right up on the wall. There's crosses. We listen to Christian music. And, like, the guy before that, Corey, like, that was not me. I know you can't see. I got tattoos all over me. I raced motocross growing up, Mohawks. Like, that's the, doing drugs. Like, that's the core of me and who I am. And Jesus radically changed my life, man. He radically changed my life in that moment through Aaron's testimony, And, I was talking to Josh about this. I want to be very clear with people. In that moment, I think a lot of times we hear testimonies, and, Aaron had shared that with me. And I'm going to be real with you guys. Like, I had so much disbelief, Corey. There was moments in my life where I was in my home office crying on the floor with K-Love radio playing, literally praying to God saying, this is silly. This is not going to work. Like, this is the dumbest, like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe I'm doing this. But I had no other option, because, like, the only
Disbelief about the gym?
No, about God saving my life, about Jesus Christ actually being able to change me, because I had such ingrained thought patterns this whole time. But I share that with you, Corey, because I think a lot of times we hear testimonies, especially if somebody was atheist or somebody, like, has a big disbelief. It wasn't like Aaron told me that and magically my life was different. But it was Aaron told me that, and Josh really helps me connect these dots. Then I partnered with God and I worked my butt off, right? The name of this podcast is Discipline, right? Like, the first part of this podcast is discipline. And I applied massive discipline and action to what he asked me to do. To finding a church, going to church with my brother, to reading my Bible, to listening to K-Love radio, to, like, just not giving up. And then slowly throughout that period, like, I started to see the world differently, man. There was this point in my life, Corey, where I sought out a local pastor. His name is Shane Smith. I'll never forget this. And I reached out to him. I said, man, can I come talk? And I had actually coached his family. His family works out at my gym. And I went over to his house. And I was like, dude, I'm having an identity crisis. I was like, the world looks different. The birds sound different. And I actually told him, I was like, it actually feels like I'm high. You know what I mean? And this high was like Jesus Christ changing my life, me having a completely different viewpoint on life. And it was almost scary because it did feel like a sensation, like a drug sensation, right? And that's my message today, Corey, is like, if you give your all to Jesus Christ and you're disciplined in your life and you feed your body correctly and you exercise, dude, that's the high everybody's searching for, right? That is what you're seeking for, especially if you're somebody with addictive personality and past. Like, there's no greater feeling and there's no crash or come down from it. And as I'm telling Shane Smith this, he's just smiling from ear to ear, bro. Like, he's just grinning and he's like, the Spirit completely changed your life. And it was so cool, bro, because, like, it was something that you could tell he's heard a bunch. Like, he's had people sit in front of him like, dude, I'm like losing my mind. Like, I'm like, is this real? And he's just like grinning like, yeah, dude, that's what happens when the Spirit changes your life, And that was what, like, the gym then changed, man. So I made a video. It was either on my Instagram or the Strength Compound's Instagram. And it was like, hey, I just want everybody to know we're moving into a new location and it's going to be God's gym. We're changing our core values to faith, family, fitness. We're going to have crosses on the wall. We're going to have Bible studies at the gym. And if, once again, you look at my past, Corey, I know people watch that video and was like, Trey has lost his freaking mind, dude. But sure enough, bro, like, we move in, we go from listening to hardcore hip hop and rock music to, now we listen to a ton of Christian music. And, like, if you walk into our gym, like people say it all the time, you can feel the Spirit there, so there was, like, a lot of radical change throughout that point. But that is the Cliff Notes version of my faith story and how I found Jesus Christ, man.
Man, I love it. And there is so much to get into there. And the first thing that stood out to me is something that I feel like is relatable in life, but most common in the Christian belief. And that's like whenever you saw those people in the church that were not living the life that you knew that a Christian should live. And the thing that I've seen most people struggle with whenever it comes to Christianity is the recognition that what you say isn't what you're doing, and you don't want to be like those people, if that makes sense. So like they people weren't really affected by God, and it's not the message of the Bible that they have an issue with, it's the Christians that they have an issue with. And I forget who said it, but I think it was Gandhi that said, I love their God, but I don't like the Christians.
Mm.
And so it's just this, and I love the attitude that you took after that, because this is where I think the rubber meets the road for most people is, and really defines, I don't know, someone who's willing to do the hard things and to, I don't know, if you wanted, or you knew that you needed Christ, and you also had this in your mind that Christians are soft, Christians are not disciplined, Christians are weak people, but I'm sure there was something in you that said, I can do it though. Like, I know this is what this is what the standard is, and this is where I need to go. And so having that discipline to see someone else not doing it correctly, but having the faith and discipline that you can do it correctly yourself and take that action, that first step to, make that change in your life, is where I feel like so many people get it wrong. It's like, whether it's business, whether it's faith, you have the option of seeing people do it one way and saying, well, that's wrong, I'm never going to do it, or seeing it and saying, that's wrong, or that is what I want to do. And even though these people are doing it wrong, I know I can do it a different way. And having the ability to say, I'm going to blaze a trail that I don't see to make it happen. And so, and then, man, okay, so what was that like? Because you said from the beginning, I hate God, and then you said I got baptized. And so, how did that journey happen?
That's just, I think, just being a kid. It's like, and I think sometimes, traumatic events like that, they're almost easier to deal with as a kid because, it's,
Hmm.
you forget you're growing up, things are going on and things are happening. But the saved and baptized things, that was just like what all the adults told me that I needed to do. You know what I mean? As around me, it's like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, like you need to. And in the moment when I said I hate God, I'm just like, I was just a little kid with disbelief, of like, because I mean, seriously, like if you imagine your best friend, literally, like we raced motocross together. I just saw him. It's like, oh, God has a plan. It's like to kill my innocent little friend, like just these innocent kids.
Hmm.
So I think the saved and baptized thing just became because like that's what everybody around me told me to do, and
Yeah.
I think that like I hate God thing, it was like an emotional reaction in that moment. But I want to double back to something you said there about the Christians, and I think that's our duty, right, as men, is to create the man you admire and give him to the world, right? So I had said that, looking around in my church, Corey, I didn't see anybody as a young kid, as a young athlete that looked up to these superstars. Like, I didn't see that. And that's my mission today, and what drives me is like, hey, like, dude, let's be disciplined. Let's be in shape. Because let's be honest, man. Like young kids, dude, they see muscles. They're like, that's cool, man. And then you got a cross around your neck,
Yeah.
and then you can start telling them about Jesus, right? And it's just the entry point. It's like, yeah, you can do this, and like, because that then gives that young boy that Trey needed to look up to. It's like, man, if I could meet me today as a young kid, I'd be like, that's cool, dude. You do all this, like you do all this running, like you lift all these weights, like you have a business, like you're kind to people, you're in good shape. It's like, so I want to put that out there too. Is like, I think it's missed in the Christian community. It's like, man, create the man you admire and give that man to the world.
I love that. And then, again, going back to it's not people, or it's not the Bible that people don't like, it's the people. And so whenever you said the pastor was getting on to y'all for having Yu-Gi-Oh cards in the was in the church or in the sanctuary or anything like
Yeah, yeah, we
that.
were just like in the church, just like laying on the floor playing around.
Yeah, and it's always I don't know. That's another one of those things where I kind of get it. I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's like the decision to go that over the top. Like you become the person that drives people away from the church instead of saying, "Hey, let's look at like what the Bible says about what you're not." I don't know, somehow tying the Bible to all this instead of just coming out and saying your opinion of the situation that these kids are demonic. Now, just to label them demonic is just like it's another opportunity for man to fail and Christ to lose.
100%, man.
But I don't know, that journey of addiction, and like you said, you grew up in a small town, right?
Yeah, we have two stoplights, like small town.
I don't know, I can't. Yeah, and it's so relatable because I grew up in a tiny town in Texas, and like it was just the exact same story where it's almost like there's nothing to do, and like you fall into that lifestyle, and like your friends around you are doing the same thing, and it resonated with me so much about what you said with your brother because I had a friend who was doing like we were doing all the exact same stuff, and it's it becomes almost like a identity break. Like one of you, whenever one of you leaves, it becomes almost like you're, or I understand that hurt that the other person feels because I can look back now, and I'm sure you can look back now and see it. Like they see you as being a different person, and you not choosing to stay in that lifestyle with them and choosing to embrace, things like discipline or things like bettering yourself in whatever way that looks like, whether it was weight loss or going to the gym or not doing drugs because you knew it was going to affect other things. It's so easy to see how that's like an identity break for them, and it breaks so many relationships. And I hate that that was the last thing that happened with you and your brother. And I'm just so sorry that all that happened.
It's crazy, Corey, because like I said, obviously I shared that story and I was very dark during those times. But I spoke at a 5K this past weekend called Tomorrow Needs You. It's all about suicide awareness. And my brother, just to share a little bit more about him, my brother's, I bring him up, dude, because like he is in me and he's part of this whole thing. And he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, dude, when we were 11 years old. Like he has suffered through life.
Wow.
Like he tried to take his own life as a young kid. I remember going to see him in mental hospitals as a little boy, being like, "Dude, my brother doesn't belong here." Like what? Like I couldn't understand and wrap my head around it. But I just share all that with you because, like, as I reflect back and look at the journey that God has me on throughout this entire life, it's like it set me up for this entire experience, right? That whole God has a plan thing that made me very upset as a young kid. It's like is the truest thing ever, dude. Even to the point, Corey. So I have a tattoo on my back. My whole back's done in memory of my best friend that was killed when we were young kids. And the cemetery that he's buried at, man, that church had burned down. Well, when my brother was murdered, turns out I got in contact with the pastor, the owner of that land. There was one plot left there, man. One plot left there. So I got to bury my brother right near my best friend. And it's just like that whole God has a plan thing. There's not even a church. There wasn't even a church on the property when this happened. And somehow there was one plot
Yeah.
left for him to be there. And now I get to go visit both of them, every time I go see him. So, I just share that because, like, dude, our greatest pain in our life, that ends up being our purpose. And I say that to everybody
Hmm.
because, like, that doesn't make it any easier. That doesn't make it any less painful. But when you can remember that, and I still remind myself of that to this day, of like, your pain is your purpose. Like this story that I'm sharing with
Yeah.
you, like this is a story I'm supposed to share to help others. So, and I know that as life unfolds for yourself, Corey, and myself, like we're going to go through more things. We're going to go through more tragedies, more hardships, more suffering. And if anybody's cracked up in their Bible, that's the story of man, right? So we got to
Yeah.
embrace it.
Yeah, I love that. And so the transition from being someone who's addicted to drugs and maintaining like a normal life. Like you're out in the community, you're working a job, you are at the same time though, like popping pills, cocaine and everything like that. And so how was that transition out of that lifestyle into fitness and like starting a personal training brand?
It was so hard, man. I was sharing with Josh about this. He's like, "Did you just like wake up one day and quit?" And no, But I'll share this with
Yeah.
everybody, Corey. That's such a great question. Anybody that's like been up for nights on drugs or days, like addicts are they're the strongest people in the world. And I truly believe that addicts are God's warriors. And I'll explain what I mean. When you've been up for days or nights and you're still trying to maintain a normal life, you have absolutely wrecked your dopamine. You've wrecked your sleep.
Mhm.
And trying to enter back into the real world on all the lies you've been living is one of the most painful, treacherous things you could ever go through, dude. And that's why addicts, they just keep going deeper because like they don't want to keep going through that transition. But there's a lot of people, myself included, I would just be like, time to suffer. Like, let's get back sober today and like, let's march through this. And at some point, dude, that just got old, Corey, especially when I found fitness. So I slowly started transitioning out of that, because like it was so hard, bro. It was so difficult. Like, I remember telling my brother, like, we were up for like 2 days straight. And I remember I was off work that weekend and I slept till like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And like, he came in my bedroom and I'm like, dude, I can't do this any longer. Like, I can't keep doing this, man. And he just laughs, right? Like, pretty sure he was probably still on stuff. He just laughs. He's like, oh, it's not that bad. And I'm like I'm like, no, this is miserable. Like, I'm not going to continue doing this. So that's how I slowly transitioned out of it. It was like finally coming to the realization of like, dude, it loses its fun. Like at some point you just keep
Yeah.
going and you're like, this is not the way I'm trying to live my life. And I needed fitness though to be plugged into my life to show me that there was another way, to show me that like, it's not a coincidence, Corey, that God designed our bodies to feel amazing and release all these chemicals in our brain after exercise. Like that's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
Like in a lot of the things
Hmm.
that I was chasing was I was trying to do that just through drugs, right?
Yeah. And so, like, whenever you were getting off, because I don't know, there are people definitely at the gym, most people have met that if you're an addict, it's almost like you either embrace the addict lifestyle with the gym and you just use the drugs to fuel the workout, or you come to some sort of realization that this lifestyle is hindering the progress that I want to make in the gym. So, which was it for you?
That's a really good question. So it was even a slow transition
Like, cocaine is the best pre workout that I've heard of.
um, so I actually never did that. So I never did that. And what's really funny about that is like when I got the gym and I understood how good it made me feel, man, I never wanted to intertwine the two because I was like, man, I finally found this thing that like helps me feel good in life without drugs. So the last thing I wanted to do was incorporate that. However, there was a point in my journey because I smoked cigarettes as well. Smoked a pack and a half of Newport Menthol 100s every day for 6 years, and I remember I would leave the gym after running and I'd be smoking a cigarette on the way home. And like eventually I'd just be like, this is retarded. Like this is stupid. Like I got
It's
like
impressive, though.
I know, but it's like, you get to that point, you're like, all right, this is not going to get me to where I want to go. So just like as I kept incorporating positive habits, I think so many times, right, Corey, people try to just cut out all those things out of their life. And it's like, well, how about like, let's introduce some positive stuff. You don't have to radically change everything in this moment. But eventually, hopefully, you'll get to the point where you're like, all right, dude, like I'm running and working out. It really doesn't make sense that I'm smoking a cigarette on the way home from the gym. Like, so
Yeah.
that's kind of how that all worked out.
And that's like, I feel like that's the core of discipline, though, because you're disciplined to do something. Like, and it's like life is going to happen. You're going to fill it with something, and you're going to be disciplined to do something that brings you joy. And so in that instance, it was, I'm going to run and I'm going to smoke cigarettes. And that's an impressive thing to do and takes discipline in itself. But the, I don't know, replacing it with something else that you knew was going to benefit you. Like it's just discipline of a different kind for a positive benefit. And so I don't know. That's so I love the thought of smoking menthol cigarettes to get home after doing a workout. But and so you start the fitness business. Like why did you want to start a fitness business? Like, what was it about? Like, was it just that this was, so much of an impactful thing in your life that you just wanted to make it your lifestyle?
So fitness is what saved me first, Corey, and I'm very open with people about that. I wanted to start with a faith journey with you because that's so important to me, and that I wanted to take it back to when I was a young kid. But the fitness piece, man, that saved me first. And the reason that I wanted to be a personal trainer is because fitness radically changed my life, dude. Like, in losing that 58 pounds, like in the whole journey, it changed my life and who I was so much, dude, that I was like, I gotta share this with other people. Like, I have to. Like, and to this day, that is my message. Dude, fitness is the most powerful thing that we can do in this day and be like disciplined with to change our life. So that's where, like, hey, I want to be a personal trainer. I want to help people do this for themselves because, like, fundamentally it changed the core of who I am today.
Yeah. And I love that because I feel like a lot of people go through that phase. Like, there's a point where, like, for myself, I went from 120 pounds to like 170 pounds and felt confident and was able to, transform myself in a way that made my life better. And it seems like so many people go through that phase where they realize the gym and fitness like changed their life in such a dramatic way that they want to give that to other people. And the I don't know, the fact that you not only wanted to do it but have done it is such an impressive thing. And so whenever you started everything, like, how was it? Like, how was it starting the business? And like, once you made it past the honeymoon phase of like, I'm helping people change their lives, like, once you got into the business side of it and the fact that fitness is now your life, like, was there ever a time where there was tension between you and fitness, or like you wanted to leave it because it was just like everything you did?
That's a great question. Now, I still consider myself I am a much better coach than I am a businessman. That is for sure. And so there was never any tension between that per se, like never like me wanting to get out of fitness because fitness still like I like fundamentally like right this morning I went and ran 6 miles before I hopped on this call. And like before that 6 mile run, Corey, like I was a different person. When I sit down in front of this camera, like I'm a complete like I meet a new version of myself every single time I work out. Now there's resistance always, right? There's always like, I don't really want to do that. Like I don't, but you get through it. You're like, man, that felt really good. So like as I'm building the business, I was working a full-time job. I got my personal trainer certification. Now there was many times where I almost quit, Corey. So I would work 12-hour shifts. I would go to the gym after and I would train 2 to 3 clients, so 2 to 3 hours. And then I would work out myself. And I would be driving home at 10:30 at night, having to be back up at 4 a.m. the next day for another 12-hour shift on concrete floors. And I remember driving home many times, bro, like, this is stupid. This is not going to work out. But dude, the next morning the alarm goes off and I just do it again. And I look back on those times and I'm like, holy freaking cow, dude. Like that was insane. Because now I'm like, dang, I need to get some of that work ethic back in my life now. But it's that whole concept, right, of like, when you're at the bottom of the mountain, you're always more hungry than when you're at the top. And not that I'm at the top of the mountain, but I'm at a much different point in my life. And there's no full peak to anything in life. But there was never any tension, to answer your question, between like me wanting to step away from fitness. Now, there was a lot of self-doubt and a lot of, wanting to quit. And there is a lot of business struggles that still go on today. But the fundamental core principle of what fitness can do for people in their life, dude, I will never forget. And that is imprinted on me forever, man.
Yeah. And I love that attitude of basically if you don't quit, you win. Because that's the principle that, is through fitness, it's through faith, it's through life. Like if you are disciplined to just show up, to do just like one more day. Like all you have to do is keep this going one more day and eventually something happens. And so is there like a breakthrough for you or is it still like a constant one more day situation for you? Or was there like a breakthrough that happened where you like feel like you made it to at least somewhat the other side?
I love that question, man. So I think there's been many breakthroughs throughout the point. But still, man, my day and calendar is so packed. A lot of days, there's still a lot of those nights where I'm coming home, Corey, and I'm like, dang, can I repeat that tomorrow? You just get up and you do it, man, and it is that principle,
Yeah.
and that's discipline, right? Like you said, that is like because you know that's going to produce the outcome that you want. So, was there breakthroughs? Absolutely. Are there still there's there still self doubt? 100%. But that core concept that you just said of like, one more day. One of my favorite things in AA that they talk about is like you don't have to quit drinking forever. Just one more day. Like just quit drinking today,
Mm,
right? And it's whatever you're trying to
mm,
go through in life. Like if you're building your business, man, or if you're like trying to be better in your relationship, it's like I'm just going to do it today. Like the moment that we can realize and understand how to truly be present in life, like that's a superpower. Because, dude,
yeah.
anxiety, all anxiety is an over magnification of the future. Like, but if we can be right here in
Mm,
this moment, me and Corey, like there's nothing else on my mind right now besides having this awesome conversation with you. Right? That is
yeah.
actually feeling like a superpower in life. And the more that we can implement that into all areas of our life, the better that we're going to be and the more disciplined we're going to be able to be.
Absolutely. And so then the transition you made from your business going from I guess, because at least looking through everything you have on Instagram, you started in powerlifting, went kind of bodybuilding, and the faith journey really started around that time. And so, how was that for your clients? Like, did you lose anybody, or was it just like a jarring situation for everybody to go from, like you said, the hardcore rap or rock and roll to now like Caleb's playing on the radio? And the main one thing I wanted to ask you, I didn't want to throw off you know, how you were going through everything, but whenever your guy said, I want you to turn on Caleb, I was just thinking, good Lord, I hope that they weren't doing a fundraising season, or a fundraising season whenever he tried to listen to Caleb.
Yeah, and so the K Love thing, I think where Aaron was coming from there is, he just wanted me to listen to Christian music, and to this day, right, like we listen to a lot of Christian hip hop and things like that in the gym. But to answer your original question, yes, we did lose a lot of members. We lost a lot of clients. But there was a whole new wave, right? There was just a new transition of people. And to this day, Corey, there are things in my business that we could accelerate from financial and memberships and coaching, but that the spirit convicts me of doing, man. It's like we're not doing things that way. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Um, and I think that's an important piece. I'm glad you brought that up, is because when you pick that cross up and you deny yourself and you follow Him, there are going to be decisions in your life that you may would have made that could benefit you and your family and not really be a negative, right? It's not like you're doing anything bad per se, but it's like that does not align with the Christian values, which goes back to back to the beginning of like, all right, dude, who are you, Corey? Who are you, Trey? Are you actually living Christ-like principles? Or are you just saying I'm a Christian with a cross around your neck?
mm. Yeah, and I love that you said that because it's such a powerful thing that I don't know that many people realize to, because we can be that person that pushes people away from Christ, even though we're trying to do the right thing by looking like a Christian, like wearing the cross around your neck. And like I've been so hesitant to get any sort of like Christian tattoo because that is I look at it as such a heavy burden because it's labeling yourself and everything you do with and I mean, I'm sure it puts an incredible amount of accountability on you, but it labels you in every interaction to say, like, when someone sees like any sort of tattoo of the cross or anything on your body, like you're now associated with Christ and you now control this person's perception of what a Christian is. And so, like, whether it's business or anything like that, like the decisions you make when you associate yourself with Christ are just it's a powerful decision. Like to align yourself with Christ as a person is hard. Aligning yourself with a business in Christ is, I don't know. I can't imagine. So I have a massive amount of respect for that decision.
Yeah, it definitely was difficult, and like especially with the brick and mortar facility, it can be challenging. But at the end of the day, dude, I know that God has a plan for everything. Bringing that back, and that's like it's been a lot easier with the online remote coaching stuff that I do with embodying that from a Christian principle standpoint because it's not such targeted into just such a small town. Because like on social media, on the internet, getting to
Mm-hmm.
talk to you, getting to talk to Josh, it's like your people find you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that right now when we're talking, Josh's stuff is just finishing going out, and that's one of the last things I posted was the difference in entrepreneurship now and when Josh was doing it, because he, was doing brick and mortar. Like the only option when you were a entrepreneur back then was like brick and mortar. There was no social media, there was no ad targeting campaigns to, pitch yourself to people you've never met. But like you said, this or the brick and mortar aspect of your business is just like one of those things you can't change. But the ability to expand and find your people now is just so good. And like the amount of options you have to expose people to Christ and fitness is just incredible. So, what is like the main thing, like when you get a client online or in the gym, like what is your favorite thing to give to those clients, or
I
like your
think,
favorite message?
yeah, so that's great. So like my favorite thing, we'll go remote. So with my remote coaching clients, like the spiritual side of things is it's in our fitness program. So like when somebody's onboarded with
Mm-hmm.
me, like and I get them all set up, like in their daily habits, like they have a verse of the day today. They have a verse of the day habit to check off with their workouts, with their nutrition, with their water. And then as I progress their training phases, right, as we do progressive overload and periodize their training, I do the same thing with their scripture reading. So like phase one, if somebody's like, because I want people, man, when they're really tackling their fitness to attach their spiritual side of things right off the bat to habit stack. So if I onboard somebody that reaches out to me, which is pretty common, man, I've lost myself. Like I want to get my health and fitness on track. Like I see the spiritual side of things too. I start them out, dude. We get their workouts, their nutrition plan, everything dialed in, and then also every day they have to do the verse of the day on the Bible app. And I give them. There's no excuses for that. It takes 5 seconds. Like just read the verse of the day, and move on with your day. And then phase two, it's like, hey, now I want you to journal about that verse of the day, right? Phase three, now we're going to get into some scripture reading with your fitness. So like what I'm really passionate about now, Corey, is like, and that's something that I can't necessarily do in person, but I can do remotely, is like I can attach with their fitness program as we progress, and as their body changes and as their mind changes, their spirit lights on fire, because we just progressive overload that concept as well. So that's like that is what I'm so passionate about right now. Like I'm on fire for.
Yeah. And what are the objections you have to overcome with that? Because I know, like, if you're with someone in the gym, like asking them to do like an extra 20 push-ups, like they're right there and they can do it. But with online coaching, you've got someone who's living their own life. And if you say, like, if you throw on, like, you have to read 3 chapters of the Bible today, like, and they give you a pushback, like, what is your usual response whenever they say, I don't have time or I can't do this?
So anytime anybody tells me they don't have time, I ask them to pull up their screen time on their cell phone. And I have never asked anybody that, Corey, that did not look at that and say, oh, wait, I actually do have time. Like I've never asked any
Mm-hmm.
client that, anybody I've ever worked with, to say, hey, let's look at your screen time. And I could run into somebody where that's not the case. But everybody has time, and we prioritize time for the things that we want. And I'm lucky and I'm blessed, Corey, that like the people that come to me for remote coaching, like, they're really passionate about wanting to grow their fitness, their spiritual, and their mindset and their discipline. So I don't really get any pushback, and I think that's because we progressively layer it in, right? So I'm not going to ask somebody to read 3 chapters of the Bible. Um, but my hope and my goal is that like as they're progressing through their program, that the spirit is asking them like, hey, let's dive into that next chapter there, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not Trey telling people what to do, and Trey, it's just like, hey, I just want to hold them accountable and then watch God flourish in their life through understanding, being disciplined in all these other areas.
Yeah. And I was hoping you were going to say that because it seems like that's the core of what we've been talking about here is the fact that you're disciplined to do something every day. Like you have established a discipline in your life that you're going to, like you said, on screen time, you're going to look at your phone for this amount of time. And so now let's change that discipline to, Christ focused, like something that is like, instead of having Instagram open, maybe have the Bible app open and take 20 minutes of your screen time to read the Bible, because I think it's 13 minutes a day. You could read the Bible in a year. And so, I don't know. I love that perspective of challenging if someone were to do it. Like you said, no one's really giving you pushback, but if they do, like there's obviously things that we're disciplined to do throughout our day that we can adjust and transfer that discipline to something more positive.
Yeah, and thank God for the Bible app because that stole everybody's excuses. You know, like it's like, I mean, it really does. It's like it really you can't because everybody's on social media. Look, I'm guilty myself. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
do a lot on social media, but like it's much easier to click that Instagram app than it is that Bible app. However, that's an excuse people use, right? And that's where accountability comes in and really setting yourself up for like, hey, remember these are your goals and these are what you want. And my job as a coach is to help you get there. My job as a coach isn't to be your friend. My job as a coach is to lead you and remind you of the things that you actually want to get to in life.
Mm-hmm. And you've done a great job. Like speaking of being a coach, you've done a great job setting the standard of what you're expecting people to do in the life you're setting for people to follow. And one of those ways is 100 mile race. So can you talk about why you chose 100 mile race and then, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And then what that experience was like going through it.
Yeah, man. So this is awesome. So when Jesus, you know, that story about Jesus radically changing my life, there was this point, man, where I was running my second marathon. And I fueled my entire life off self-hate, Corey. Like my entire life. My
Mm,
fitness journey, me growing my business, working up in my career, like I'll always just like if I want to do better something, I just beat myself up. And I want to be very clear, that is a powerful resource, but it is a finite
yeah.
resource. And I hope that nobody lives their entire life like that, you know? But I share that because I was running this marathon, man. And I remember I was at like mile 20. It was my second marathon. And I was like actually trying to beat myself up because I wanted to run harder because that's when it starts to get difficult. And like the thoughts wouldn't even come through my head. And I'm like, what the heck? And like one of my favorite scriptures is take every thought captive and bring it to the obedience of Christ, right? So like here I was like freshly with my spirit on fire trying to beat myself up. And it was like the spirit of God wouldn't even let me talk to myself like that. So I kind of had another identity crisis. I'm like, man, am I even going to like do this fitness running thing anymore? So as I was praying and I was journaling about this, you know, I was thinking like, how can I highlight the power of Christ? Like, how can I truly highlight the power of Christ? And I found ultra marathons, right? I found 100-mile races. And I'm like, what is the most opposite thing you could do, Corey, fitness wise, from being depressed and not leaving your house? Like the only opposite thing I could think about is like 100-mile ultra marathon. Like because the training it takes, the discipline it takes to get there, the suffering, the pain, the sacrifice. So that's where the Run with Christ project was born. And I hired an ultra marathon coach, started training for my 50 miler that led up into my first 100 miler. And there's a lot of cool things that God did throughout this experience. I didn't really know what I was doing, man, for this 100-mile race. And I didn't really have a crew. I was actually living out of my gym at the time. There was a lot of things going on in my life. And with a 100-mile race, you need a crew and a team to really be successful at these things. So I had my brother, Brandon, who's always there, but he's never ran an ultra marathon. We don't really know what we're doing. And long story short, God planted these two brothers in my life, these two strong, faith-filled people. One reached out on Instagram, the other reached out locally, and they came together and helped crew me for my first 100-mile race, which was last year in December. And what's so beautiful, man, we were out there to show what Christ can do for you in life. Like the absolute power of Christ to take somebody like myself, who was an atheist and an addict most of his life, and save me and give me the power and strength to run a 100-mile race. And throughout this time, Corey, all of us are out there talking about our faith journeys. Everybody's from different walks, and it was like this whole time we were out there running with Christ, literally. You know, just authentic conversation that came up. And I ended up completing that race last year. I think it took me like 31 hours and 50 minutes. It was filled with tons of pain, tons of sacrifice, and tons of suffering. And after that race, Corey, I was like, man, there's more to this. Like Run with Christ project. All right, that was the first 100-miler. Where do we take this thing? Which is where the Run with Christ mission was born, right? And the Run with Christ mission is our goal is to run a 100-mile race in all 50 states. For one reason, not for Trey to run 100 miles. And I have to be very clear about this. It's not about the races. That's just the hook. It's just the catch. You know, because as a lot of people could probably imagine, man, you got to run 100 miles. There's a lot of mental health, on those sides of things. So I get to talk to a lot of people when I'm out there running. And I get to tell a lot of people about my testimony. I get to plant seeds, and I get to say, man, like, we can do this because we love ourselves, and like Jesus gives us the power to do it. And if you look at the story of Christ and you look at all the pain, suffering, and sacrifice in the Bible, like, as you could probably imagine, 100 miles is a lot of pain, suffering, and sacrifice. It is not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. So after that race was where the Run with Christ mission was born, and the whole mission, man, is just to highlight what Christ has done for me in my life. It's just to highlight, like, how powerful Jesus Christ is, and how we can partner with him on our health and fitness, and how it doesn't just have to be, one thing or the other. And it's turned into this just beautiful thing of like all these adventures of sharing times with friends and family, and just, all getting better. So I'm 3 weeks out right now, Corey, from the third 100-mile race in the last year. So we're heading out to the Georgia mountains in 3 weeks.
Okay, so I've heard you lose your toenails quite a bit if you run that much. So, yeah, can confirm.
You got to sacrifice your feet, bro. If you're running 100-mile races, they're sacrificed, bro.
Oh man, but you didn't say this, but it seems like just the perspective of understanding that there's going to be pain in these races, understanding that it's going to be difficult, but it's going to end. And if you just don't quit, like, you get to the end of, even a 100-mile race, which it's too early in the day to think about that. And I just haven't ever, I think I've run a 5K. Yeah, I've run a few 5Ks, but so the thought of, and for me, like, that was the only thing on my mind was like, eventually this pain has to end. So I can't imagine 30 plus hours of a 100-mile race. So which state are you most excited about for doing this 100-mile race in?
I'm really excited for this next one. So I've done North Carolina. I did the Florida Keys West 100, which was absolutely miserable. And if I could imagine what it feels like to run through hell, it would have been that. I'm really excited for this next one. It's called the Endurance Hunter in Georgia. It's through the Blue Ridge Mountains, but it starts at like a youth ministry camp, which is really cool. Beautiful course out on the Pinhoti Trail. So any race really that like is going to be out in the mountains is like really excites me a lot, because you get to spend a lot of time and enjoy what God's put out here for us. And then next year I'm really excited. So 100-mile races this year. We decided to level it up a little next year. So I'm doing the Triple Crown of 200s, which is 3 200-mile races in the span of about 4 to 5 months. And I'm really excited for Lake Tahoe in California. So a 200-mile race out in Lake Tahoe. So that's probably the big one that I'm looking forward to next year. But that's, and I say all that, Corey, just to say that, like, just to remind myself and everybody listening, I don't know if my body can even hold up to all that. I have a tumor in my hip. I struggle with a lot of things, like, physically from running that much. And if I don't, man, then that's okay. Like, my identity is not wrapped up in an ultra marathon athlete or anything like that. It's just realistically to show the power of Christ and what Christ has done for me in my life. And it just gives me a platform, to highlight that. Mm-hmm. And I would love to say one more thing about the ultramarathon community. What's so beautiful about it, Corey, is at these races, there's tons of volunteers, and it takes a lot of people to get through these races. And if you look back at like Jesus washing the disciples' feet and like all the things Jesus did to serve people and how we're supposed to be servants, there are random people at these races, dude, at these aid stations, that will take your shoes off, that will put food in your mouth. And it's like the most beautiful, like Christ-like love you could ever imagine. Because it's all these people just helping runners get to their end goal and completely sacrificing their time and what they want. Like they're there to do nothing but serve you. And it's like the most beautiful depiction of like how Christ loves, man. He's like, here, let me have your feet,
Man, I love that. That's a great message. If anyone's in a church, like, that would be a great way for your church to go and serve the community, would be to find one of these 100-mile races and like take your church to embrace what you just said, to be the hands and feet and to love on these people in such a tender way where they are in such a vulnerable position. And I think that would be a great way to establish who Christ is and the message that we as believers want to put out there. So thank you for sharing that, because that's I feel like that would be great for most churches to embrace in some form or fashion, and personally.
Absolutely. So I've already had, like, if my body ends up not being able to hold up to all these crazy events, it's like I want to do like a Run with Christ aid station and just try to go, we'll set up literally and just try to make it like the most biblical Christ-like aid station ever. Like where we have like buckets like for people to clean their feet and things like that. So if something happens and my body can't hold up to those races, like I still want to hold on to that and use that as another way to highlight the power of Christ.
Mm. Man, well, I'll be praying that you are able to make it through, just because that goal is such an impressive goal. And but if you're not, then that's another great standard to reach for. Well, Trey, is there anything, or what would you leave people with? What's a message you would want to give to a disciplined community?
To always remember that discipline is not doing the things that you actually love to do. I think that gets mixed up when you say the word discipline. And it's really big in fitness, and I used to be this guy. Like, dude, look, I love working out. Like, just honestly, are there days where I don't want to? Sure. But for the majority of it, I love working out. I love the feeling it gives me. But if you have discipline in one area, guys, understand and utilize that now to find the next hole in your bucket, to find the next hole in your game, and apply those same principles to that. So that's the biggest thing that I want to leave people with discipline with, is it's not doing the things that you just love doing, right? Even if it looks like from the outside in, that's what people see discipline as. If you're fit and in shape, it's like, no, discipline is doing that hard thing that you don't want to do, but it's going to produce the outcome in the future that you need/want. And then lastly, Corey, that I would love to leave people with is just, if you heard this message, like whatever it is you're going through in life, whatever pain, whatever suffering, whatever sacrifice, if we look at the story of Christ, and I love this message and thought, Christ went the darkest, he went the deepest, he went through the most suffering, and he went through the most pain. And that allowed him to save all of us, Corey. And I just share that because anybody listening, your pain, your suffering, your darkness, the things that you go through, is for you to overcome and save the fellow man or woman in life. So embrace it and understand that all that stuff is your purpose. And one day you get to stand and talk about it, and you're going to get to help so many people go through theirs.
I love that. And shameless plug, there is a Pain Has a Purpose shirt at the Disciplined HQ store. So check that out.
Perfect.
Nah, but I love it, Trey. Man, thank you so much for being here this morning. And thank you for sharing everything that God's done in your life. And I'm definitely going to continue praying for you, brother.
Absolute blessing, dude. It was an honor to get to catch up with you, man.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good, brother.